Elon wasn't quite done flaming analysts this weekend, and the barnacle scraping has begun at Tesla. This is Tesla Tidbits episode number 400 for May 7th, 2018. We start things off today on Twitter, where Elon wasn't quite done flambeing the financial analysts he'd cut off on the recent earnings call. In a series of tweets, Elon laid out what caused the exasperation with the pair. He started first with a bit of an introduction. Quote, "The dry questions were not asked by investors, but rather by two sell-side analysts who were trying to justify their Tesla short thesis. They are actually on the opposite side of investors. Hyperchange represented actual investors, so I switched to them." End quote. Then he got into a bit more of the detail of the actual questions. Quote, "Please ignore this thread unless you're interested in a tedious discussion about Tesla stock. First, it's important to know that Tesla is the most shorted, meaning most bet against, stock on the market and has been for a while. The two questioners I ignored on the Q1 call are sell-side analysts who represent a short seller thesis, not investors. The reason the Bernstein question about CapEx was boneheaded was that it had already been answered in the headline of the Q1 newsletter he received beforehand, along with details in the body of the letter. Reason RBC question about Model 3 demand is absurd is that Tesla has roughly 500,000 reservations, despite no advertising and no cars in showrooms. Even after reaching 5K per week production, it would take 2 years just to satisfy existing demand, even if new sales dropped to zero. We went through the same drama on S and X and almost all confirmed in the end. Will likely be even better for Model 3 as customer satisfaction score post-delivery is higher. I worry about demand. Just spent all night in the factory, not the showroom." End quote. However, Elon did later offer a bit more of a conciliatory tone when @GlobalProTrader asked him, quote, "If you know their negative angle beforehand, just block them in the queue so that you never have to hear such questions live. Problem solved." End quote. Elon responded, quote, "True, and once they were on the call, I should have answered their questions live. It was foolish of me to ignore them." End quote. So, a bit of my rare analysis here. With some time to digest all the proceedings and some hindsight, I've got some thoughts. I think we may be getting to the point where Tesla could use a COO to shield Elon from these types of calls, much the way that Gwynne Shotwell handles things at SpaceX for him. Doesn't mean he can't still hang out on Twitter and snipe where he feels necessary, but it's kind of clear that he's pretty well had it with the negative Nancys out there, and the problem is that on a financial call, you're somewhat obligated to deal with those types of questions, and if you don't, you can rightfully expect flack as to why. That said, I totally agree with what Elon said about this. In fact, as it was happening, I had the same thoughts. The stuff you're asking is already in the financial letter. Why are you still asking this question? And the two he blew up on weren't even the only two guilty parties on this. As I said on Twitter following the call, it's almost like these analysts had their questions locked and loaded, and when they were answered by the letter, they had nothing better to ask and felt like they couldn't just ask nothing. So instead of simply staying silent, they waste everyone's time and ask anyway. And then the bit about Model 3 conversion rate is extremely silly. We already know that people will defer the order not because they don't want the car, but because an option that they want is not yet available. I'd have been in the same boat, as dual motor is a must-have for me. Currently, that conversion percentage I have to think is going to be a bit anemic, but it doesn't at all reflect a lack of demand for the car. For me, the metric to watch is the combined total of deliveries and current reservations. This should remain relatively flat or continue to increase, assuming all is well. Despite the delays that have probably chased off a few reservation holders, I have to think this will be easily the case on into the future. Lastly, for today's show, also coming from the earnings call, the barnacle scraping has apparently already begun at Tesla. Electrek reports that contractors are about to be under extremely intense scrutiny. In a new note sent out, Elon dropped the hammer, quote, "Please note my comment below about contractor companies and consultants. I extended the performance evaluation deadline to provide more opportunity to demonstrate excellence, but now time is up. Please send a note to HR before Monday justifying the excellence, necessity, and trustworthiness by individual, not just the contractor company as a whole, of every non-Tesla person who has badge access to our buildings or network access to our systems. By default, anyone who does not have a Tesla employee putting their reputation on the line for them will be denied access to our facilities and networks on Monday morning. This applies worldwide. Time to scrub off the barnacles. Thanks, Elon." End quote. Elon has set a pretty high bar there, saying that folks vouching for a contractor were putting their reputation on the line for the contractor. I know in my mind that sets an entirely different evaluation level if I had to determine if I supported someone. There are very few people in this world that I'd put my reputation at stake for. I think it's pretty clear that Elon wants most, if not all, of the contractors working at Tesla to pack their bags. We'll see how many remain after the dust settles. You can check out the links to the full stories in the show description. While you're doing that, please consider supporting the show financially through Patreon at patreon.com/Tesla Tidbits. Thanks very much to our super patrons out there supporting the show at the $10 plus level. They are John Waltower, Drew Schuyler, John Waller, Mark and Sarah Thomas, Ryan Scarborough, Lee Sweet, William Henry Crew III, Dorian Steve Guberman, Bruno Quidici, Joey Boots, Ralph and Cheryl Waterhouse, Adam Raymer Brown, Megawatt Photovoltaic Development, Todd Sullivan, Robert Healy, Mitch Long, and Zortec LED Canada. If you can't support with dollars, be sure to show your love with positive reviews and subscriptions on YouTube, iTunes, and other services across the internet. That's it for today's episode. If you have feedback for me, the best way to be heard is to tweet at Tesla Tidbits and use the hashtag AskTeslaTidbits if you'd like your question to be considered for the show. I'll see everyone back here again tomorrow. Until then, keep it charged and hit the road.